This episode of the Fire Dog Podcast is supported by AOS Services, the one-stop shop for firefighting equipment compliance built for the DoD. At AOS Services, they help military fire departments stay mission-ready with customized programs that bundle everything from SCBAs and compressors to hoses, ladders, PPE care, rescue gear, and more. Their teams work worldwide, so whether you're stateside or overseas, they've got you covered. For all your firefighting equipment compliance needs, visit aosservicesinc.com to learn more. This episode of the Fire Dog Podcast is supported by Roll Call Coins. Founded by a 24-year Air Force firefighter veteran, they understand that a coin represents more than just an event. It represents a story. Using 3D modeling and custom textures, Roll Call has moved beyond generic designs to create premium, standout coins. Whether you're honoring a department or branding a business, they make the process effortless. Start your design today at rollcallcoins.com and let your coin stand out in the stack.
This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson, and thank you for listening to episode 66 of the Fire Dog Podcast. In this episode, I sit down with a guest whose career spans military medicine, naval search and rescue, and leadership at the highest levels of the Navy enlisted force as a Command Master Chief. From his early days as a corpsman to his time in search and rescue and eventual transition into fire service leadership consulting, Flip brings a perspective shaped by experience, service, and an understanding of what it means to lead in high-stakes environments. Throughout the conversation, we dive into his experience with the Navy, dive into several leadership topics, and discuss his experience in leadership consulting. Flip shares lessons learned along the way, highlighting the importance of communication, building accountability systems, and developing leaders who can adapt to changing generations and expectations. We also explore what it takes to build strong organizational culture and why policies are important in creating organizations that both function and thrive. Whether you're in the fire service, the military, or any leadership position, there are practical takeaways in this episode that you can immediately apply. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast, Flip Griffin. Well, Flip, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, man. I'm appreciate to be here. Really excited to talk to you guys and be one more in a long line of like pretty cool guests that you've had. I've seen some stuff over the course of the few weeks. Once we said we were going to do this, I went did really deep dived and pretty good, man. Really awesome stuff that you do. Great questions and great guests coming on and giving a great perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just trying to get out of the guests whatever I think listeners or whatever we think listeners want to hear, and I've looked back at some of those episodes and sometimes I think like, man, I was grilling them pretty hard. I kind of feel that a little bit. I've adjusted my approach just a bit over the years, like to try to make it more welcoming. There's a few times where I've had guests reach back to me like, man, I didn't feel good about that. Like, oh, that's on me. In my head, I'm like, oh, that's on me.
Sure.
I got to adjust the approach, but I appreciate that feedback. That's good feedback.
Yeah, no worries, man. Oh, good.
Well, Flip, you reached out to us, and I appreciate you doing that. I looked through your stuff. You sent me a few things, and then I actually listened to a couple podcasts, or one podcast that you did recently, just to try to get an idea, like, who you are and what you do and what you've done, because it's just a bit of a unique guest for us. We, as you've probably noticed in our episodes, we highlight a lot of, we focus in the Air Force domain, and fire service within the Air Force, and there's a smattering of others that I've talked to that are not federally affiliated. But I don't think we've ever talked to anybody affiliated with the Navy. We've had a few Marine Corps. So it's cool that you reached out to us and you like have this connection with the fire service too, which is awesome, but not through your naval experience. But through your naval experience, you also have some like paramedicine, or, you're a corpsman. So you have the medical side of the house. So you understand that. So, and then the search and rescue, of course. And there's some listeners out there. There's some folks within the Air Force enterprise and the fire service that maybe don't do the kind of search and rescue you did, but have some USAR experience. So really kind of like affiliated, not affiliated, unique perspective. So look forward to picking your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, that's one of the things that I kind of, so I guess I can probably just lighten a little bit of the listeners to it. The federal, and this, right? Federal fire is it's big, right? Like it's really big in that, like, not only do, whether it's crash and salvage for, all the Air Force bases and naval aviation bases and like, it's just, people don't realize how big that service is and how many, at every base, pretty much most every base you go to in the military period has, and they know this, right? Because obviously you guys are focusing on it. But for me, the interesting part was I never thought I was going to be fire adjacent my whole entire career, but that's what ended up happening. And this as well, most people do. Back 20 years ago when I was riding in ambulance boxes, like, we weren't part of, I stayed over at firehouses, right? We were running calls with them all the time. Like, it was that way, but we didn't have the, the mixing and the melding that we do now with everybody. Most paramedics, most services, most counties are, they're combining everything, so back then it was separate. A lot were separate. So like, that's how we knew. And then over the course of my career, and this is, I'm really proud of this though, that almost every single place I was working with fire and EMS for local, every single place we've gone to. So I wasn't expecting it, but even over in Japan or, in the Middle East and stuff where, because you are the medic and because we are that way. And then for all your Air Force listeners, I would say too, just so we know, or they know, I guess, search and rescue corpsman. So just like your PJs, except you guys did a little bit more with special operations. We did a little bit more with like home-based stuff. So we had some guys do special ops and do things. And I worked with your guys down in Kadena, and we'll get into that story. But I love just, it's been a great experience kind of in doing all this for the past X amount of years I got to, and almost a crime. Like, I got to do all this cool shit for all this time. So, but It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, it is cool. You kind of, and I'm sure you have a great perspective now that you've crossed over. You've retired in 2019. I don't want to take away your talking points. I don't want to take away your story, but you've been out of it. And so you probably had that time to reflect on and maybe miss a little bit of that military service, because what an awesome opportunity we have is military members to get paid to do the things that we do. In your case with search and rescue and being a corpsman, going to Japan, same thing for us, being able to travel the world and be firefighters in different places. We go into the Middle East and interact in that environment and have to contend with different environments and different cultures and different ways of approaching patients. And same thing in Europe, different trucks, different lights. The lights are blue, like just that.
Yeah. Helmets are smaller.
Helmets are different. They use different SCBAs. It's just when you take a step back and look at it from that perspective, just what an awesome opportunity we have. And I try to not take that for granted. And it's easy to when you're in the position, but I always try to reflect on like what an awesome opportunity it is to be a public servant in the military capacity, and then be able to deploy and do those kind of things too. So
yeah, pretty neat. Again, and when you don't expect it, like, I didn't expect to get back into fire, and we'll get into how kind of I did, but then look, when I did, you mentioned like in 19, like I retired in 19. I took all that time, like, of course I was trying to go find, work to do and things like that in that sense, but like just the calling came back, and I kind of came back, if I like to tell you, to my roots, right? Like, came back to EMS, came back to fire, came back to the blue collar, gritty kind of people that, I grew up with all the time, and that's what's natural to me. And now just trying to help them. I mean, I know we'll get into that later, but just trying to be there and hearing what's going on, and like you said, like, I will say in 19, when I retired, 20 changed the game for everybody, right? Like, COVID hit, like, I'm talking to my best friends, and they're like, dude, we can't leave the ship. We're in a hotel, and then we have to, like, just craziness had happened, and I didn't experience any. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, my war and all of our wars ended, right? In 2019, 2020, whatever. Like, it was different. And then the change now, just in 4 years, like, normally you don't have that big a change, but it's the cycle, it's the cycle of ramping up, and we've got too many, and now we're back into this whole cycle again. So it's interesting. And like you said, it's been fun. It's been an absolute blast for everything that I've done. And now still just having a good time again, refound my purpose, and that's good. So all fun.
Yeah. I look forward to talking to you about how you got reconnected with the fire service, and how you're connected now, what you do for the fire service. I look forward to having that conversation with you. Sure. Yeah, man, what a paradigm shift it was in the 2020 time frame. And we're in like this collectively is a Department of War now. We're in this identity crisis, kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still a capable military, but it's like, what do we do? You know, like, what am I here for? And how are we going to
Yeah.
contend with a peer adversary? And yeah, it ebbs and flows. And anyways, I could talk about that all day. I enjoy having that kind of conversation. But I
Yeah.
want to highlight you. I want to allow you to introduce yourself. We've talked a lot about, your background a little bit, but just to give you the stage, tell the listeners who you are, maybe where you're from. And then after that, I want to kind of hit on your naval experience
Sure.
in a little bit more depth.
Sure, absolutely. So, born and raised Buffalo, New York. So I'm a diehard Bills fan, a diehard Sabres fan at heart, and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of big scabs that we have, for Buffalo people. So, and I know about snow, so that's good too. But went to college for a year and just decided I was going to play soccer and track, and it just didn't work out. School wasn't for me, like a lot of kind of enlisted people start off. That just wasn't for me at that time. And so did the year of college and then was like, you know what, I'm going to go in. So I went in, and I originally actually was signed up for the Coast Guard, blew my knee out beforehand, and they were like, nah, we're not taking anybody that's broke. So ended up doing the Navy piece, and then coming in, and luckily I was over 6'2", no acne, didn't wear glasses at the time. So they were like, hey, you want to come and do the Presidential Honor Guard thing? And so right out of boot camp, I got picked up to go do the Presidential Honor Guard, and that was for Clinton's second term. Like that was that time frame. Was that. So really learned a lot, like almost was ruined a little bit because you meet all these generals and all these high ranking people, and they're just normal people. Like what I didn't realize is, any service member, young service members who never met someone high ranking, you kind of put them on that pedestal. And so that was like my first. So for them, they were debunking, the leadership myths, like this, these generals, and in fact, it was an Air Force general. I'll be honest with you. We're on a funeral, like a full honors, and they were there too. I forgot who it was from. Maybe it was Shally Catchfeely's retirement. And this Air Force general, because I'll remember it distinctly, bro. You're the only one. We have like scrambled eggs on the front. You guys have this badass, like, thunder and lightning stuff that's on there. The general's helmets or the general's covers. And so but he was like, man, we all he said it literally. He's like, we all put our pants on the same way. And like, I'm an E2 and like hearing this, of course, you're like, whoa, but it was kind of the awakening, I think, for me. And this is brand new in. Now I'll admit, I didn't get it. I went through that. I went to Bethesda Naval Hospital, just being stupid as a young kid, just trying to figure it all out. It's our college those years, it's their 4 years of college those times. But then decided, they're like, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, well, I'm going to pick something. And honestly, man, it was 8401. It was the first naval enlisted classification code that was there. And I'm like, what's search and rescue? And I had wanted to do other things before, kind of in that world, and I just never got to. So like I had the opportunity and was like, let me go search and rescue. And so went down to aircrew school, did all that. Back then it was more OJT to learn how to be there. Like you had to go to the initial school, but now they have a complete and total pipeline and everything else that, pretty dedicated. But got to go do search and rescue, and went to Puerto Rico first for it. And that was, again, eye-opening, just fun, but just, 24/7 fun. We worked in the ER. Most of us had worked like ER or someplace else in aviation medicine, and then got to go also with the squadron that was there and kind of do stuff. And honestly, man, like our world changed. Like obviously, this too, right? 01 happened, and then everything changed in 01. So we were all heightened up, and we were all doing things. And the nice part about our job scope was they were so small, and we weren't really known. So we were actually downsizing our units up until that point. And then the Army came calling like in 05 and said, hey, we can't do this anymore on the ground stuff. We need your guys' help. Can you guys do medevac stuff? So we got to, that kind of reinvigorated us. And then the fleet was like, dude, we want these guys kind of on the carriers so they can do, the medevac things on the carriers and support our soft guys and everything else. And so honestly, from the time, and we were all part of it, because it was a dead end job scope, to be honest with you, to some degree. Like everybody was like, you get to a certain point and then you had to move on. And this kind of opened it up for us. And what ended up happening is with 100 or so men and women in the scope, we ended up promoting a lot of people really quickly to the next level, to like the E7 and above level. And that's not good either for a small group, because we were letting people go. And so otherwise, a bunch of new places opened up, the job scope opened up, and just being search and rescue was so much fun just to do things. And even like when I went to Japan, nobody was there. I had to set the whole program up for myself. Like, we didn't have supplies. People didn't even know what we could do. So you had to be this like salesman of sorts, which was really weird, because you think like, oh no, dude, we're, like, but people were like, what can you do? And I'm like, oh shit, like, like full paramedicine by myself if I need to. Like, and they're like, oh, that's a capability we haven't had before. And I'm like, yeah, here we go. Let's do this, So that was, again, it was tough in the sense of like from a structured standpoint, because you're young, you just want to do the job. And everybody, like even young firefighters, right? You just want to, we recruit them to, carry the baby out of the burning building. And you don't get to do that all the time. In fact, most of the time you don't. Like, if you ever get one of those, it's probably a very much rarity that you're gonna. But yet we have to train to that, right? It's the kind of quiet paradox we live in this rescue world of I want to use every skill set I have, but damn, I don't want to see people in that position, right? Like, you don't want to have to. So, but it was good. Like, again, once I picked up steam, I went to Japan, had a great time in Japan, got to do things, left just after the Fukushima happened. So I got a phone call when it happened I was in Pensacola at the time, and they're like, hey man, you were just here, all these capabilities, what's your suggestions? So I got to help staff wise a little bit, and it was my guys, the team I just left that was doing most of all that medical evacuation and flying through the plume cloud, all the shit that was happening. So that was a lot of, again, just a different side of it all, seeing it. I had deployed a couple times. I had been with over there, and we deployed a bunch of times to the South Pacific, but like that was like, holy shit. So those guys went through some stuff, so but all fun. I would say, like, if you looked at it all, and then you get to a certain point where you're staff and you're trying to help out, the new guys, and I helped create, we all helped create the pipeline to make it better for the people than, that we left it to. And I would say now, like, I'm really proud of all the groups. There's probably, when you look at tiers of, there was this group that was right before me, there was my group, and then there was like the next group after us. And I'd say we probably made the most change within the department. We were doing the more than anyone else had done in our job scope, and then just the change wise to make it something more permanent, make it align with, because we were all by ourselves. We couldn't classify ourselves as like combat medics. We couldn't classify ourselves as PJs. We couldn't classify ourselves like SEAL, SAR. Like, it was different. So we had to be able to, all right, let's find our own little niche here of what we could do. And so it ended up being good. And now it's obviously like, high level transport and, point of injury care stuff. We're right there with anybody else, which I'm really proud of, to this day. So.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for walking us through that journey. I think you've alluded to it quite a bit when you were speaking. What is the scope? So your paramedic equivalent.
Yep.
And how are you similar to pararescue? How are you different? So
yep.
do you go on like a carrier? Are you assigned to a ship? Are you assigned to a naval air station? You go out if a plane goes down. Like, what's the origin of that MOS, AFSC? I don't know what you guys call it in the Navy. I can't remember.
We called it, it used to be called NECs. Now there's something else. I can't remember what they're called now.
Different.
But the 8401 was that portion of it.
The numerical identifier.
Yeah. It was honestly, it was 01. So it was the first one on the like 84.
Oh, that's easy.
01. Right. So it was the first. Yeah. So I joke, but the truth was,
you picked the first one you saw.
Yeah, well, sort of, right? Like, they're like honest, like, so when I was at Bethesda, I worked on labor and delivery before. Like, I was a normal corpsman, chose to go corpsman after the guard, go to Bethesda, and then they're trying to sell you to be a tech of some kind, right? But at Bethesda, these cardiovascular techs, like, they were moonlighting on the weekends, and they're making like, and I was like, oh, maybe I should go do that. And I was like, oh, I'm not that smart to be a cardiovascular tech. I'm like, let me go do this search and rescue thing, right? Like, if you ain't, like, how it is. If you ain't,
you're
not smart,
a
you're
lot
strong.
different than clinical medicine.
Yeah, and if you're not smart, you're strong. So I could deal with that, right? This is one of the things we talked about at Rescue Swimmer School all the time. But so for us at the time, all we were at SAR stations. So we had places like Maine and Keflavik was open, and like Meridian, Puerto Rico, Cuba. At the time, it was like Fallon, Whidbey Island in Washington State, China Lake, all these places. And then all of a sudden, they shut them all down. So like our NEC had all these people, and literally the moment that they shut them all down and took those billets away, and places closed, like Maine had closed as a base, right? BRAC had closed it, and they started to do all the joint stuff like where you are now. Like there wasn't joint at the time. It was, well, you all get learned. Well, all of a sudden it was like, hold on, we need you guys on the carriers. And we were like, oh, and then like there was there was two squadrons, well, one squadron in San Diego, one squadron in Norfolk that were also supporting. They were kind of like the D-160th of the Navy, so they were the HCSs. So those guys were doing stuff, special ops with all the SEALs, right, when they couldn't get kind of those sets. So we had these little pockets of places all the time, and then all of our Marine Corps stations. So that was the other thing, like Cherry Point, Yuma, we had those fully stocked with corpsmen with the Marine Corps. So like we knew there were good places to go. There were other places that didn't do a lot of work, but for us to compare, I guess the best way to put this is in between. Go to flight right now. As of now, they go to flight medic school. They still go through their own search and rescue corpsman school, which we did not have at the time, and so. The best way to put this is fully ACLS capable to do anything we could, and full paramedicine type of deal. Now they go through the paramedic program. So all that being able said. So the only difference is we didn't do dive and jump, but we would do rappel. And then we could do some free fall, like some of us could do rescue swimmer stuff where we're jumping out of the helos or whatever. But normally it was we were the overground guys.
Land
so
based.
if there was, we were land based. So if there was something that was over, we would send the swimmer. Well, so a normal crew for us: pilot, co-pilot, crew chief, rescue swimmer, and then corpsman if you had it. So that way, that would be our crew. So normally, like you said, crew chief's putting people down in the water or down on land. We're dealing with the medicine piece as they come back up, or if we were down there. So in that sense, kind of just like everything else. And then the war kicked off. We did a lot more, like Kazovac stuff, point of injury care when we were in southern Iraq and Kuwait. So again, and now today, same thing. They're a lot more about they do a lot more about long-term stuff, like long-term care and things like that. So they've evolved over time. We've gotten it more structured for them. I think for us, it was like you get 50 hours, now you're qualified in the aircraft. Now it's a lot different where they have a lot more, but so pretty close. So besides diving and free fall, like parachuting, I think the similarities are pretty close after that.
Okay. What about combat training? If you're ground based and you're being leveraged in Iraq and Afghanistan for that capability, that search and rescue capability. I know pararescue was leveraged pretty hard for that in Afghanistan specifically. Is that what was in your scope of responsibility too?
So we didn't. So for us, we were second level, adjacent to that side. So some of them, like if they win HCS or in that case, they absolutely did. And there was a few, probably 10 guys that were in that, like Pup and Pollock and all those dudes. So, but I will say, like on the other side of the house, though, it was always like we were there to do organic combat SAR for our carrier air group. So if you went on the carrier, you were there to do long-term medevac. You would do it off the fixed wings, or you would do it off the helo squadron you were with. And then if you were there to support anyone else, you could do. Like when 15 walked off, when that guy got thrown in a cage and set on fire by ISIS, like we were there supporting the evacuation of the embassies and that kind of a sense of doing SAR and strip alert stuff for those. So we were, just call waiting in that sense. It was just the same thing. But most of it was the good and bad. Like our rescue swimmers and our crew chiefs, when we would go to Fallon, we were set up for combat SAR or strike packages, if you will, for that. Not necessarily, we weren't busting down doors. We weren't supporting in that way any sense. Now, again, a few guys had gone down that route and that, but mostly it was organic things waiting. And luckily, you don't lose too many aircraft. So we weren't, you're not entirely busy. So then the rest of it was, hey, like if you're on a carrier, you were probably you were probably first assist with the surgeon, so you can get your hands dirty all the time. I was that for mine. You were probably senior, so you were probably in the aircrew shop, leading kind of from a senior leadership role in some capacity. And then if you were junior, you were just there, and then medical readiness was our other side too. So like when we weren't doing all that, we were trying to make sure that everybody had their shots and all that other kind of stuff, and kind of doing little.
Yeah, I was just going to say
things.
how many people were coming to you on the ship. Hey, I rolled my ankle, and
Yeah,
that kind of
that's
stuff.
an easy one, like
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I think that gives us a good idea, man. I appreciate you walking us through that and providing all that perspective. I want to also highlight the fact that you were a command master chief, which for us, I think the equivalent would be like command chief master sergeant.
Yeah, it's your
right?
top guy.
Were
you're
you
top
the
in
senior
Yeah.
listed leader,
Yep.
representative for the commander of wherever you're
Yep.
assigned.
Yep.
Tell us about that
Yeah.
experience a little bit. What'd you think
So
about
it was.
that?
So I think I go when I go back, and I say this to all new firefighters and every, because we're in the same, right? It's the same type of job, right? Same skill sets to some degree, but yet the same brotherhood, sisterhood that you have, right, in the fire service. Same thing military wise. I think it was E5. I got it. Like I finally got it, right? Like I understood. I knew what, to get ahead and to understand what everybody was trying to do. Finally, the light bulb switched on for me. So at that point, I was like, and I had met some really great mentors, some really great master chiefs that were a part of, really great leaders that I was a part of. And I was like, ooh, I think maybe I want to do something like that. So I started just on my own with my peers. I will tell you, man, for all my, if Eric or Nick is listening to this, I don't know if they will, like we had 3 E5s just running by ourselves, dude. Like no oversight. Like it was awesome. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're
Dangerous
yeah,
and awesome.
right. Totally dangerous, but also completely like, we're just 3 guys. Like we weren't worrying about big time stuff. This is the oddity about all of us. Like any of the special operations in, whether you're the STS guys or whether you're SEAL, you're all part of that JSOC world. Your money all came from all that new thing, right? Terrorism kicked off. It was kind of a free bank account for everybody. We weren't part of that. Unfortunately, we were split between medical and aviation. So like we were owned by medical, but we flew with aviation. So there was always this constant fight of who pays for what and blah, blah, blah. And different places utilize people different ways. But I'll say this, like once it got worked out, I got it at E5, and then it just kind of took off for me. So a lot of things that happens in the corpsman world is, great skill sets, but like I couldn't take a test because the tests were about preventive medicine or they were about oncology. Like they were about all stuff that, because you had to have this kind of all-encompassing test for everybody.
Right.
So we were so specific that search and rescue was never on a test because it wasn't there. But you tell me what the temperature of eggs should be served at, or how many holes in a traditional Navy coffin. And that's the shit we had to apparently remember, right? So we never did trauma medicine. And if it wasn't up to date, because as well as I do, like medicine changed, that 20 years changed medicine, like trauma medicine, like our outcomes were so much better, right? We were giving almost live plasma in the field type of deals, right? Like just the world was changing and medicine-wise, but they weren't catching up with the tests. So most of us were like, this doesn't apply to us. I'd rather just work on. So finally that ended up happening. But I met those good leaders, and then I finally, when I was in E7, I was like, man, I think I want to be the E9. Like I just wanted that. So I had a choice. I had a choice when I was in 15. I had a choice whether I wanted to go stay corpsman and go that route to E9, towards corpsman, or I wanted to stay operational, because if I was going to stay corpsman, they're going to send me to a big hospital, and I didn't want a big hospital at all. So I chose to go command, got picked up for the command senior chief program, so our E8s can start off at that, and then, you get a small
command. That was at
command.
E5 or E6 when you did that, when you made that transition?
No, I made that transition at E8.
E8,
so,
okay. So
yeah,
they give you a choice in the Navy? They
you
give
can get
kind of a path?
Yeah, so you can get to E7, and there are some command SEL billets for E7. There's not a lot of them at all.
Yeah.
But E8, they had the program, and they were just, honestly, they were building this program up at some point. Because most people, you made E8, you got to E9 and then you went to command or whatever, but the program is set that they wanted to start to build those administrative leaders really,
right.
And to go.
So when you do take that path, you're steering away from your functional responsibility and towards leadership. Man, that's a great thing. I've heard that the Navy does it. I think I've heard the Army does it too. The Air Force does not do that, and I think that we need to.
So when you guys get to a certain point, can you guys stay?
You stay in your functional lane of responsibility for the entirety of your career, and those senior enlisted leader positions are side husles, additional duties. If that makes
so it's like a collateral duty.
If you wanted to pursue that, you can. When you get to E9 and you talk about command chief, command master chief equivalent, you're pretty much at that point going to be away from the career field for the rest of your career.
Right.
But, if it's a first sergeant, I don't know if you guys have first sergeants like the Army has first sergeants. But if it's a first sergeant, that's an additional duty. I step outside of my functional lane of responsibility for a few years, come back into it. Maybe I leave as an E7, come back as an E8. So there's a little bit of a gap in understanding with that functional lane. So that I think that we should be given a choice. I think it would be better for continuity's sake, give people like, hey, I want to take that. I'm strong administratively. I work well with colonels and generals, et cetera. Let me take this path. I'm stronger in the fire service. I'm stronger in my functional lane. I think that's a great thing. So that's cool to hear.
And the easiest way for us to, like, I'll use a squadron, for example, because it's the easiest. Like, you have a maintenance master chief E9 that's downstairs, and they are running operations, right? So anything maintenance-wise on there, it's not hard. I was just discussing this I was at a fire department this week, and we were discussing operational and administrative chains of command and how if you don't have those set where people know exactly how to route things through one or route things through the other, you can end up with a lot of clarity issues about, how information is flowing. For us, it was, look, the maintenance master chief, if you had anything to do with maintenance on any aircraft, that was his responsibility. You would, but when it came to like the 24 other programs that PT program, your sexual sapper programs, like all those things, those were run by the CMCs, right? So, and you can make that choice. And once you had the cookie, what they call the cookie, that thing back there on my mug, like once you got that, you were command master chief forever. It has changed now. So anyone who listens to this today is going to tell me, yes, you can go back and forth. They just did a whole redo out it where we were taking, because what we were doing, and there was some good and bad to this, but they were taking people from like the sub community, and it didn't matter, or the surface community, and they'd go, hey, we need a new master chief over at one of the new squadrons. So you'd get a sub guy all his life walking into a helo squadron, and you're like, okay, how's this going to work out? Some of them worked great. Others were like, they wanted to bring what they learned in the sub community over or the surface community over. And that is not how aviation works, right? Aviation works a lot different because they're their own little, like you guys have too, right? If I talk to your STS guys, they operate a certain way. You go back to medical, those dudes they operate a certain way too. So we had the same problems, but for me, I didn't want to. I wanted to stay operational. I wanted to be a CMC. So I obviously got picked up for the program, which I was really excited for. Went to command schools, all that kind of stuff, and then got VX-23 as my first duty station, which was the Test and Evaluation Squadron in Pax River for all jets. So we owned from the F-35 to the Iron Eagle, which was the drone that was there. Anything that was on a carrier jet related, it was ours. We owned that and we tested it, which was great. We had 1,500 civilians and about 150 sailors and officers with it. And so I was humbled and honored to get it. I was super excited to get that. I was really excited to get that and thought I was going to go more. And then we had a little bonus baby. And so it was a good thing and started life completely over. Right. So I was like, I had 2 daughters that were about to go through middle school at the time. So I was like, do I want to be?
It was time to go.
Yeah, because they had made routes. We were in Pax River, Maryland, in southern Maryland, just outside of D.C., and we had made some pretty significant routes, I think, that were there. And so it was like, do I want to I was going to be assigned at Norfolk, So now they're not going to move to Norfolk. So I was like, I'm going to be that dad and that husband that drives home every Sunday, right? Back north to the job. And it was tough, but, I had done a lot. I had deployed a lot. And I was like, I think for the family reasons wise, it's probably a good idea. So, but I had made it up, made 9 while I was there, was able to do that. And then just decided, I had to go a different route and everything else. But I loved it. Has fun. My best 2 friends, one just retired last year, was an E9. The other one's still there. He's at the Blue Angels right now is their command master chief. So like super excited for just still living through him that he's still in
vicariously.
But, yeah. So, but it's been fun in that sense.
That's awesome. I think a lot of listeners can relate to that sentiment, that feeling of, I'm kind of in a similar position. I'm in the twilight of my career, and it's like family or career. What are we gonna do? How much more are they gonna be able to endure and move and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, that's got to be a tough spot, but I feel for you. And
I just told someone this.
As though,
I just had him interrupt you. I just had like this week. I had an older gentleman who was about to retire, and I said, and you're gonna. I would tell you the same advice, right? For you guys, the big blue and silver machine is still gonna keep moving when you retire. Like it has nothing. It's those wheels are moving. Yep. And I think I learned that like the big blue machine, and I told him, I was like, you can call it whatever you want. Like the big red machine, dude, it's still going to move on when you retire. Right. So you gotta figure that piece out.
Yeah. Somebody said it, last week maybe. And I forget, I had these conversations. I forget whether or not it was on a podcast or somebody I talked to in person, but it was, I get everything mixed up, but the fire department, when you leave it, is going to operate just fine without you.
1,000,000%.
Regardless of how good you are as a fire chief, as a leader, deputy fire chief, or whatever position you hold, captain, it's going to go on without you. We're going to roll on. They have to, they have
absolutely.
to. They're going to figure it out. So that's a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure, especially for those in the twilight of the career where you have a bit of an identity crisis. It's like, well, what am I going to do? They don't need
Trust me.
I need somebody to need me, and so that's why it's so important to find a mission outside of the military.
Yeah, it's purpose, man. I'll tell everybody. I went through.
Outside. Yep.
I wish I would have known Ryan Reynolds a little bit more. I would have invested in an aviation gin. I should have a long time ago.
The actor Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, the actor Ryan Reynolds. I wish I would have invested in his aviation gin in about 2019. It would have been good, to figure all that out. And luckily, I'm over that now. But it's tough. Like when you don't, like you said it, like when you're called command master chief, when those responsibilities are on you, when you're called,
you got the uniform,
whatever, right? Like you're called captain, you're called battalion chief, right? You say that every day. You come out of there and you're like, what's my purpose now? And that's what really led me back. Like that's kind of what led me back to it,
And I know the Navy holds their chiefs in high regard, and chiefs, correct me if I'm wrong, E7 through E9, right?
Correct.
That's how you refer. So chief, senior chief, master chief, right?
Yeah.
Very high regard. So, and they similarly, I think across the services, the senior non-commissioned officers in very high regard, especially E9s, chief master sergeant. And then, I've heard some retired chief master sergeants say it's like when you get out, it's like nobody cares. Not that they don't care about your service. Thank you for your service, but nobody cares more than you do, more than your family or, who you were a year ago. Like, what can you do for me now? And that's
I think one of the big things that I learned, I like to say, like I got my OJT MBA in those first like 3 or 4 years when I got out, because what I was learning was they do care. It's not that they don't, but at the same time, it wasn't like us. Like ours was, the money was always going to be there because of the war going on. So there was no like, well, if we don't. It was never like a money issue to stay working. But like when you get out, you're like, okay, people want to care about people a lot. But when it comes to it's this conundrum for business owners.
Line.
Correct.
There's a bottom line.
Right. There's like and it's
we
tough
need to survive as a business.
Yeah. And we don't have that that's not a military trait, because you're like, you're not going like, sure, we shut places down, but that's fine. We put everybody else every other place we can and whatever.
There's always a flow of money for the troops, quote unquote.
Yep, absolutely. And that was, I think, it wasn't a shock, but it was definitely oh shit, like what? Yeah. Okay, this is different. This is and that changes your mindset, because at some point you got to go, I can't be as, however you want to put it, as as brash, right? Because the other side is people could just go, I quit, right? Like, and you couldn't do that either, right? Like, so
Right.
I always tell people when they're reading some, leadership books, I'm like, just make sure you think about who is telling your leadership book with a grain of salt, because there's definitely the I would say that the lessons still apply, but like I realized that my lessons are all built from people that I had complete control over to some degree, right? Because I was military, I could control what time they did stuff, I could control, right, all that stuff. But when you get out, that lesson it's a different lesson when those people have a say, right? And that say is just, well, go, I'm not going to deal with this shit. I'm going to go on to the next one. Like that's a difference that we did not see in other places, because ours was, you got to rehabilitate, right? If this dude is horrible, right, and you got to, like, you have to find a way to rehabilitate. It wasn't, you couldn't push that problem on, and they had no choice in it either. It's not like they could go, I quit. Like, it wasn't how it worked. So I think that's some big differences that I see, in today's.
Yeah, I know a lot of listeners can identify with that, man. And I've certainly dealt with it myself. And I think that's a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next with you is leadership. Because the military is just, in my experience, it seems, and this is really the only experience I've had in my adult life, right? Like I joined right out of high school, basically. But what a leadership experience it is. So when you have to contend with that, like I can't just fire somebody, I can't push them away. I'm given who I'm given as a leader. I'm given who I'm given as peers, subordinates, and you have to make it work. You have no choice. And then you're constantly given a new young adult out of high school, out of mom and dad's house, that you need to walk through life, but also make a contributing part of the military and the fire service. And I just feel like that for those that take it seriously, those non-commissioned officers, senior non-commissioned officers, and even some of the E4s, right? They it really can develop your leadership ability, right? And so, I want to talk about, because that's, the bulk of what you do now. So talk to me about your consulting journey, or what you did outside the military, and why you started that.
Yeah, so honestly, the first venture I took, so I was raised business-wise. My dad was a business teacher at school. I was always in the business side of everything. So that was kind of like, if I said, but back then you could take more of one class than the other. Now they have schools that you can specialize in at high school. But so business was always part of it. So I didn't know where that was going to come up later. But about 2002, I was at Whidbey Island. I was working there in Skagit County up in Washington State, just about an hour and a half north of Seattle. I was working with Skagit Search and Rescue. So the ground SAR guys, like you had said, USAR, like, so, and again, those, states like Utah, Nevada, they have like their search and rescue, Washington State, Colorado, their search and rescue units are very robust. Like they are, they're not just pulling like the national and the world certs. They got their own stuff going on in those states. Well,
right, that's
Skagit
had
testing
and training
totally
going on
100%
in those ranges.
Yep, the mountain rescue guys they had their own.
Fallon is where Top Gun flies.
That's
out.
correct.
It's either Fallon or Fallon, and then of course you got Nellis.
Yep,
and
absolutely. Yeah, and so I've been to Fallon a few times, and I was part of those groups that were doing the stuff that in there. But when you got to those places, regardless, like it was still you had, again, we were a small group. So when you got to a different spot, it was generally the same, but you had to figure out what was going on in there. So like Whidbey, for example, very robust system while they were there. They were utilized a lot from other places. So I got into the SAR. I was like, well, if I'm going to work with these guys, I might as well go be a part of them. So I ended up, being a part of Skagit SAR, working. I worked with Joel Pratt, who's a good friend of mine, still is. He's a paramedic now in Seattle, also was on the national FEMA's teams. Joel's a great guy. And Joel calls me and he's like, hey man, we really should take advantage of like these people not understanding medicine. So we actually, I just by chance happened to, we started Backcountry Medical back then, and we were doing like everything from wilderness first responder to wilderness EMT. We were teaching all that stuff we could, all the way up to like teaching gunshot wound management course for the state police. So we were rolling, and then finally it just kind of burnt out. So I've always kind of stayed in this adjacent realm, even when I was, like you said, like I was still working, Navy wise, but I was doing the extra stuff on the side. So that really spun everything up. And then when I got out, and this really was where this has kind of culminated to, when I got out, I met Dale Walls from Lions Guide. He's the head of Lions Guide, and I just actually recently broke away and kind of did my own. But I was learning these kind of leadership skills for small businesses. So I was learning these kind of like, I was doing mastery classes with small business owners. And I could feel their frustrations, and they didn't have the control, like you said, like we did, to rehabilitate. And frankly, they probably didn't have the time to, right? Like you weren't going to take the time like we did. Like it was a no fail, like he's your guy or she's your girl, rehabilitate them right at your command. They were like, I'm done. Like, goodbye, I'm cutting loose and cutting bait and finding someone else, right? Totally different way of thinking about it. But I had started and created this kind of everyday leader course and kind of curriculum, which was really based upon all my lessons and all the really books that I had started to really, I got into this like I am now. It's probably my childhood trauma of living with two educators, but like I was just starting to do more schooling and learning more, and it just kept craving that. So I was putting all those lessons together, formed it, had been great. And then all of a sudden, like 2.5 years ago, we get a phone call as we're doing total small business. We're not thinking about, we get a phone call from Annapolis Fire Department, and they're like, their chief, Nathan Powell, or their deputy, Nathan Powell, was like, hey man, we need exactly what you're teaching. And I was like, really? And again, I shouldn't have been surprised, because I knew it wasn't, just because you're a government agency doesn't mean you're getting funded or you're doing that. We didn't do that, right? So I knew. But they were like, we love what you're talking about. We love it's a different way to look at something rather than, what we were. So we gave it. So 2.5 years ago, we do a course for them. All good. We do a second course. All good. And then all of a sudden, I don't know why, but I didn't pick up that's where I should have gone, like into the fire and EMS again. I didn't pick that up as like, well, maybe I should do a whole. So I just kept trying as what we were going. And then finally at the end of last year, unbeknown, we run this kind of 90-day test. We end up getting, I ended up getting a 90-day one-on-one. I ended up getting a whole group coming on to an online course. And then, I went up to Kodiak, and Kodiak, I did a 2-day, had that all scheduled. So we proved again that the fire departments were in need of this. Right. And then as I now start to learn about, retention, recruitment, burnout issues, everything that's happening, I was like, man, this is needed probably more than ever. Right. And so
there was an appetite out there for folks.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, people, I got this. I don't know if I think, but I recently got brought on to Firehouse Magazine to start writing for them in a little different capacities. Yeah. So I'm super excited. Pete Matthews there was awesome. I was on his podcast, and we were like, man, let's write a column. And so,
yeah. But
what I found was, and I think I'm still finding this, is that it's great. So I'm on my own now doing my thing, just me, going to fire departments, but what I found is that like, there's a lot of people speaking about the problems, but there wasn't a lot of solutions being given, right? It was like, yeah, of course you have this, and of course you have to hold people accountable, and of course this. And I was like, I think everybody was waiting for, okay, so how, right? Like, okay, so give us the magic bean or whatever. And what I think is that most people don't know what it's easy on the surface to look at it and go, sure, we work in a job field that is probably going to cause you cancer when you get older, right? Okay, got it. We live in a job field where heart disease is a major factor, where we're not healthy, where, right, like all that stuff is where overtime is, mandated, like, we're understaffed, all that, right? You recruit to a job that says you're going to carry a kid out of a building, and the truth is you got an elderly lady that you're picking up 3 times a week because of whatever, because we're running more EMS.
Right.
I get it. I understand. And so when I had kind of, again, I didn't do it. I did it just because, like, all the topics I chose, or how to look at this whole thing, like this from lead self, or from find self, lead crew, it was really this whole like, okay, this is needed here. This is kind of looked at from there, because we're good at the fire ground, dude. Like we're great at the fire ground. we are not good at the firehouse. Like leading
Mm.
at the firehouse is where people, I think, get frustrated. They
Yeah.
have like all those things, and there's some of it's organic and then we can't change. But I tell everybody, I'm like, control what you can. Like if
Yeah.
we're controlling what we can, people will be okay with knowing that the service has issues it's working through. But man, those daily things, that's what people cared about. It was cared about the everyday stuff, and that's really what took off for me. Was
Okay.
the everyday things.
Man, it is. It's 90%. You know, it's 90% of, it seems, of what we do is managing those personal dynamics and leading people. I think there's always that need for leadership competency, and like I said, I think the military does a great job in developing that skill through OJT, but also through formal processes, especially through professional military education and stuff like that. That gives you some stuff, right? But it's that hands-on experience. I'm not saying that we're perfect in the Air Force or in the military by any means, but we certainly dial in a bit more than maybe the outside the fence, public safety, fire service, law enforcement. I'm not saying that there's not departments out there that do a great job. I'm sure that there are, but I think it comes down to a funding issue in some cases. But it's funny, and I seem to bring this up on every episode but it's always relevant. So I'm not trying to brag. I'm in the executive fire officer course at the National Fire Academy, and in talking with these tenured chiefs that are been in 25, in some cases up closer to 30 years, they have those leadership issues that you described, and it's like, oh, somebody's not showing up to work. This guy won't listen to me. They did this, they did that. And in my head, I'm like, that's an NCO leadership issue, a non-commissioned officer leadership issue. Like an NCO would know how to solve that. And for the most part, there's some NCOs that aren't good. There's some that are excellent, but I just think that the military translates so well. And so, yeah, you bringing your military service into that to fill the need within the fire service seems like a great fit.
Well, and again, I've been fire my whole life, not being in it. I've been either adjacent to it that worked with them, or if I would have been like, if you would have told me that I was a paramedic back then and that was what my thing was, then, and if I would have got out early, what would have happened? I would have used that skill set, and I would have been a paramedic at a place. We would have got absorbed by a fire, and I would have went through the academy, and now all of a sudden I would be a firefighter paramedic is probably where I would have gone, right? That would have been my path. But I want to just real quick, something that you had mentioned, when you look at these issues that people are having, right? Because you talk about a person that doesn't want to do the job or whatever. Perfect. Let's, I could either put the hammer down, right? Or you can use the sugar, you can use the salt.
And that's the default response,
100%.
Like, go do
right?
it. I'm in charge. Go do
Absolutely.
it.
And I think like the course this week, we talked a lot about, well, I want to use the hammer. I want to use the hammer. And everybody, again, and you probably get this a lot, is everybody goes, well, oh, are you like Jocko? Are you like Goggins? Are you like, is that how your theories are? And I tell people, I'm like, those are great. And I don't have any problems with those. But I always ask people, how many of those people do you have at your station? How many kind of the Jocko-ish, Goggin-ish people do you have there? And it's usually one or two. And I'm like, that's great. That's what works for, and it's a great thing to call out, because again, awesome that's what works for you. But I tell people all the time, if I don't relate to you, if you can't relate to what I'm saying, man, I've got 20 other people who I know do leadership development, which I will happily say, please go listen to whoever, right? Go listen to Matt on the Fire Dog. He's talking some stuff that is definitely more, relatable to you. Because I could understand, and I learned this the hard way when I was working with all the mastery group kind of business owners. I'm like telling them, oh, you got to read Call Sign Chaos because Mattis is going to teach you about, being brilliant on your basics. And I remember this woman, I love her to death, Jen. I love her, Jen to death still. And she was like, I don't understand how going through Iraq, right, like is the same as me at my business, that I'm the vice president of. And I was like, I can completely understand how you can't make that translation. And I think that's what some people love Simon, some people love John. Yeah. Right. So I've always said, like, you got to find what relates to people. And I think that's a huge leadership trait, right, Matt? Like you as a leader being able to relate a lesson, man, that's huge.
And I'd like to defend I'd like to clarify a point too. Like, I think the inclination for maybe folks not affiliated with the military is that we approach it militarily, and that you get in line, you listen to what I say, I'm your leader, and that doesn't. We're dealing with human beings in the military too. They don't, And as the generations come up, I think there's more and more autonomy, more and more questions, which you want from younger people, and we're not direct in the way that maybe people think that we are. Like, you have to convince somebody to do that it was their idea, right? It's this exercise in manipulation, and it's a bad word to say manipulation, but it's an exercise in getting some person onto a path that that they have to be on, but making them decide to do it. So just because I'm affiliated with the military and I say that we have good leadership competencies from coming out of the military, it's not because I've been pointing at people and telling them what direction to run and they've been listening to me. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like, we do teach soft skills and walking people through, but we know also how to flip the switch in those combat related or emergency environments where I do have to direct. And so
I
just
just
to
need you
clarify
to,
the point,
yeah, I just
It's
need you
gotta
to
be a
hit the
tough-
easy button, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Like, sometimes when I'm leading, and this, like, I just need to my people that I'm leading, there are times I just need you to hit the easy button and trust me that what I'm asking you to do is what we need to do, right? There's no time. And those are the ones that are usually, and we've all said this a million times. Those are all the stuff that's written in blood. It's written in ash, whatever you want to call it. 100%, there is that time to do. But I will say most of our time is not that. Most of our time is, it's not on calls that are whatever. It's back at the thing. It's dealing with,
Exactly.
right?
Like
It's
you
all
mentioned
that.
earlier, the firehouse issues. Yeah.
It's totally different. That's literally what I was like.
Sleeping in.
Yeah. Like, those
whatever.
are the stuff that people aren't, and we have such a hierarchy in the fire service that we've had for so long that sometimes that also gets in the way of things. Like, and this, we were all raised, our generation, all the chiefs that are now, right? We all came out of the 9/11. I talk about this in the course, but the motivation of everybody in 2002 was very easy to see. Nobody had recruiting problems or retention
Right.
problems in 02, right? And now all those people, and I give it to 06. If you came in anywhere from like 01, October of 01 to like 06 timeframe, you probably came in because of that. 9/11 had something potentially. Not all of them, I get it, but there was a lot. Well, now all those people are chiefs.
Well, you knew that it was imminent that you could be engaged
Sure.
in that. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, you
And
joined
now
in.
all those people are leading, and now they're at this time. And what I've seen is a lot of the chiefs that are there go, well, your motivation sucks right now, right? Like, I can't motivate my brand new recruits. And I look at them and I go, well, first of all, you were not motivated like this. You were like, I'll do anything. I watched the firefighters put the flag up like Iwo Jima. Bro, let's go. That is not what you have today. And thank God, right? Like, I tell people, like, thank God we don't have, and who knows what's happening now, but, like, to that extent, like, I'm okay with. So I think then you have to be more creative, right? Because
Sure.
at the same time.
And that's leadership right there.
Yeah,
That's a
100%.
dilemma.
Yep.
And you could all day blame the person, blame the generation, yada, yada, yada. But
It's our fault.
it's like, well, it's you. It's on you.
Mhm.
Figure it out. Motivate them, and don't just tell them what to do, because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to work in the near term, but not in the long term. They're going to stop listening to you. They're going to stop coming to you with their problems. So,
Ooh, there's some Powellism right there, baby. It's one of my favorite.
does he say that?
He said, so one of his
I-
13s are, yeah. So he says, he goes, if I'll paraphrase a little bit, but when soldiers stop bringing you their problems, one of two things have happened. Either they think you can't fix their problem, or they think you don't care about their problem. And either one of those is a
Interesting.
failure of leadership. And I think that's true. Like, people talk about open door policies all the time, and I shut that down. I'm like, that's cool. You have an open door policy. That's great. Well, they still have to walk through it. And I promise you, they don't want to walk through it. They don't want to walk through it because for a couple reasons. And I know some people get them. I get it. No problem. But most of them don't, because remember, you're evaluating them. I think people in general, and I ask this all the time, I say, do you guys love leaders? Like, we love people who lead. And we want to be led. Like, if you, especially joining this service, right? You fire EMS military, there's a screw loose someplace. I get it. No problem. You said, I want to do this. Great. That's something to me. I'm like, man, if they said they want to do the job, you've got 50%, you've got them. But now you've got to, the rest of the 50% is how you treat them, how you interact with them, right? And how you support them. That's all leadership in my eyes, right? So when I see that, and then I see brand newbies getting, for lack of a better term, hazing, right? Like, you come on and they get shit on because they're a rookie. And I sit there and I go, that might have worked back then when we were there because it was whatever. But today's generation, like Gen Z, they trust influencers over institutions, period. Like, that's what they do. So I look at that and everybody snarls. And as soon as I say the word influencers, I always get the battalion chiefs or everybody. They're like, bah. And then I say to them, like, just change that word. If I told you they trust leaders over institutions, then I go,
influencers are their leaders.
yeah, that's exactly what I tell them. That's exactly what it is. And if we took the time, I did, right? I got a 10-year-old little guy, and I'm starting to watch some of the people he's watching all the time. And they're not what I thought they were. It wasn't brain rot all the time. That's what it was. And so now I go back and I say, change your mentorship program if you have one, and, assign somebody, to be kind of this influential person. That's what a mentor is, right? And so that has changed the game to some open people's eyes and went, okay, I get that they're not as motivated, and I don't want them to be. I get that I have to do more on our side to get them and keep them motivated. And I got to sustain that, right? Sustainment of all is, okay, this is what we need to do. And there's a lot of people we know this. They're failing because of that, right? The burnout, right. I get that we're understaffed. That's a lot of stuff. Mando, overtime, all that. I get that side. I know there's other things that are kind of out of people's control, but let's work on what we can control. And, if you're going to recruit somebody or retain them, and I do think retain's more important at this, recruit second, but dude, put the effort in then to make sure that your people are good, and know that, right? There's a lot, and I'm not saying it's not being done. It is. I hate to be.
It certainly is.
Yeah. I think there's better things we can do.
And as you've alluded to, there's a need out there. If you're getting phone calls, there's certainly a need for it. I want to talk about your experience with those fire departments you've interacted with through your. So you do consulting, or you teach, you do keynote speaking. And through that experience and your interactions with these fire departments, these fire service leaders, like, what are some of the things, like, what are maybe the top three? You always like to do things in threes, it seems, of the top whatever issues or questions or conversations that you seem to be having.
So a lot of it's I usually get two things, right? One is we have a problem with communications. So I love that one, like leadership communications and just, I think, in that sense. So that's one of the first ones we always get. And then the other one we always get too is how do we hold people accountable, right? So they're having issues holding junior folks accountable, and you could tell a plethora of reasons why, but those are the two main things that come up. And then when I usually ask like in my 2 days, I'll ask a pre-course question. And one of them is, what do you love about your job? Because I think people overlook that sometimes about what
highlight the good.
Yeah, you should know that. Like, if I'm a leader, I want to know what my people love about the job. And usually I love helping people, and I love my family, like my fire department family, which is great. So I look at all this and go, okay, you've got an accountability and a communication issue that are your two top priorities. And then you also have, right. So let's debunk a couple of these, because I love this. This is my favorite. Yeah. I'm going to tell everybody, and here's the hot take. Unless your radios are broken, your phones are broken, like physically broken, I will tell every group that they do not have, and I still believe this, they do not have communication problems. They don't. Nobody has communication problems. And I know this is a word play, so everybody's like, whatever, Flip. I think you have email, you have apps, you have radios, you have all the ways that you have face-to-face, you have bulletin boards, you have all hands calls, you have meetings every morning. I mean, the list goes on, and I love doing this in the course. And I go, so you tell me, do you have, look at all the ways you have to communicate. So
Yeah, where's the problem if people don't understand?
The problem is another big C word that people, again, almost the same amount of letters, but it's clarification, right? So what people have are clarification problems. They don't have communication problems because you have a billion ways to communicate. But here's the problem. We either make assumptions that people know what they're talking about. We have hierarchy issues that I don't want to ask people some things or not. There's assumptions just in our line of work. We don't want you to think that we're weak because we ask you a question about something. So I tell units all the time, if you do anything from what I take and talk to you about, right, one of the things you need to do is start to use these two phrases in your firehouse. If you can use, does that make sense? And that's coming from the leader to whoever, and go, hey, does that make sense to you? Am I saying it? And this isn't, my wife hates it when I say, I do it to her all the time. And she's like, I'm not stupid. I know. And I'm like, I promise you, it's that me saying that is about, did I communicate it a way to you that you understand what I'm looking for to do, right? It's not are you smart enough to figure out what I'm saying? That's not it. Most of our people are smart enough. Our junior folks have the desires. They have all the same stuff. It's just, it's laying under the surface a little. But if you start to have a culture that allows you to say, does that make sense? Right. So that's the first one. And the second one is you have to have a culture that junior folks are able to say, hey, can you clarify that for me? Right. Yeah. So if I can ask those two questions,
allow for questions.
Right. You've now just eliminated all your communication problems. Because if I get something back and go, hey, Matt, I got this from you, but can you clarify what you're asking for? I think what you want is, and I say it and you go, hey, man, let me just tweak that. This is more what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Tell me that wouldn't be alone. Anything. Doesn't matter. Schedules, emergency, getting things to people. Sure. Just give me, how can I clarify that? And does it make sense? So that's number one. Yeah. You don't have communication problems. That's one of the biggest things that people see. The other one's accountability. And I'm going to tell you, Matt, I learned it on Tuesday. Monday night, I learned it. I don't know why I hadn't seen it. So it's time is perfect that I'm on here and talking about it.
Fresh in your mind.
Fresh in my mind. I had a senior battalion chief this week in the middle of one of my classes. And something I strive to do, there is a lot of people, like we said before, talking about the problems, and it's easy to identify the problems. That is not the case. It's even easy to identify the big things that, yes, you need to hold your people accountable, right? All that. And the question I get asked the most, how do I hold people accountable? And before Tuesday, I would have told you, well, you need to, and then I realized what I probably should have realized forever. If I have to hold you accountable, right? So let's say Flip's in charge of Matt, right? You're my whatever. You're my captain. I'm your BC. In order for me to ask you to do something, I'm holding myself accountable to making sure that I'm asking you to do it, right? Like part of it is first me holding myself accountable to fit. Like, let's say you had an issue. Cool. And I have to address it. People hate difficult conversations. That's one of the things we find all the time is they don't want to discipline somebody, right? Uncomfortable with. Right. So, but what I realized was, and this is what this battalion chief did. He's in the middle of class and he's like, you could see him being a little bit frustrated and passionate by like, Flip, you're not giving me the magic bean, right? Of like, how do I what do I say to this person to hold them accountable? Was sort of what I felt he was. Right. So I went home and I thought about it. I reflected on it and I was like, you know what? It's not about you. By you asking him, you're already holding yourself. So you got to hold yourself first. We all know that. We've heard that. But what I figured out was if you have a system in place or a framework in place that already holds people accountable by itself, then it's self-accountability, right? Then then you don't even have to hold that person accountable because you know the system's going to be there that he'll do it himself, right? So just by pure dumb luck, every week Matt's got to come and he's our captain. He's got to give me this report. Cool. That's great. That's holding accountability and the system's providing for it. Rather than saying to yourself, well, I have to hold you. How do I hold you accountable? It's not a question, right? It's not like just by me making sure I'm doing it on my own. So I'm holding myself accountable first to make sure you are. But then I think what we don't like to do, right, on the fire ground Everything is checklists, workflows. That's what we do on the fire ground. Listen to the guy in the white hat. He's going to tell us what to do. The gal in the white hat, they're going to tell us what to do, and we do it. Do we do that in the firehouse? No. Like, we don't have structures or frameworks in the firehouse to help us with all of our leadership stuff. It ends up being this, hey, just make it up as you go. And then when you look at like what's happening with technology and how fast things are moving, I don't know how many people have said, we have a battalion chief meeting, and half my people know what we said there because some battalion chief texts it out to their people, and I don't do that. I like to do. So now it's like this communication issue all over the place, or this clarification issue all over the place, and then the accountability just breaks down, and they blame, instead of saying, hold on, our system isn't set up to have people hold each other accountable, right? Or hold themselves. But I think if you make the system, and everybody doesn't want to hear that, we don't want to have, I was like, dude, trust me. Like, again, this week I had heard, well, we don't want to make somebody have to do, and I'm like, there's half your problem. Like, if you just put it in, it's not hard once it's set up, right? You're like, we're all used to it because we like structure. We like rules. That's what we love at the firehouse. You tell me how to do a code.
Yeah, we need it.
Yeah. Like, and we do it every time on the fire ground, but then we give
chaos,
back.
Right?
Yeah, totally. So just say that. Like, it is chaos in some of these firehouses because people don't want to, they're afraid to put a system in because they're afraid of, well, people aren't going to trust me. When a system is in and it's working, you don't even see it. It's just, this is how we do business. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's the foundation, right? The policy, the procedure is kind of the foundation. And then we don't like to talk about, it's the foundation of leadership, but don't threaten it. Don't use it like, hey, if you don't follow the policy, right? So the foundation is the policy, and then the leadership and the communication is the bulk of what you do. Everybody knows the policies there. Everybody knows what you need to do. You don't have to say it out loud, right? It's just that then you have to lead appropriately through that. And when it comes to, if somebody doesn't do something right, then you bring them in, you engage with them, communicate with them, and be the leader and ask, to your first point about communication and the issues and the asking if they understand. The approach that I like to take is open-ended questions.
Sure.
So that they say in there, instead of, yes or no, it's like, so what did you think about that? Or what do you think that we should do? I like ones like that so that we get a little bit more creativity in the response, right? And I think that helps in clarifying things. But I'd like to, just mention the policy is that foundation. It has to be there, or else it's chaos, right?
Yeah, and I think here's where people get a little bit right. This is where you take a savvy leader who has right. I heard I had a department say to me, we're talking about evaluations, and like, oh, we went away from the annuals, we now do quarterly. And I said, that's cool. And they're like, yeah, we have them do it. They run it. Like the junior folks run it. And I tell people all the time, to your point, right? If you're going to come to me with a problem, my policy has always been, no problem. Just come with a solution, right? Or at least what you think is there. Now, and I know sometimes you're going to have junior folks that don't have solutions because they don't know. That's fine. You got to recognize when you're not going to get a good solution. You're not going to, right? Or you're going to have to pull that out of somebody when you're not to make a leadership lesson happen. But here's what I've learned too. I've learned that if you let them run everything, right, you're missing. So I'm a big Patrick Lencioni guy. I think I have it behind me. Yeah, it's the truth about employee engagement, right? And if they don't know who they are, if their job isn't measured and it doesn't mean something to them, right? And that's your job as a leader to make sure that you show them that their job has meaning, that they're meeting the metrics you want to, that you need to, right? So if you do that 4 times a year, great. But if you let them bring it, here's what's the problem that I always see with this. And I love where you want to go and giving it to them, but the junior folks want to be led, right? Like they need that in the very beginning to be more of a leader rather than like I get a captain
I want to be led too.
Yeah, 100%. And I say that, and I'm like, dude, they want you to lead. They don't
direction.
They don't want to come in and go, I think I'm doing well. Like I don't like. So you got to be careful in that kind of sense.
You can't be laissez-faire.
Correct.
It's a balance between being direct and indirect. Like here are my goals. Here are the broader strategic goals or the broader goals for the direction that I want this organization to go in. You're on my team. I'm glad that you are. You're the most capable of anybody that we could get. Let's get after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you think we should get after number 1? You know?
Yep. And I think, and look, you got to tie to this whole point. Your policies, your procedures, your workflows, right? Those are all your black and white SOPs to how you're going to do business, right? Those are important because you're never going to be able to tie someone down to accountability or they're not going to be able to hold themselves self-accountable unless there's a solid set of rules that everybody has agreed upon, that they know what the metrics are and what's expected. And like, I do 2 courses and I know no one else talks about. So no one talks about spam, which we can get to in a second, but nobody talks about being a good follower, right? Either. They talk about, well, we need you to be a leader even at your level. And I bring out, look, you need 4 things to be a good follower, right? First, I need you to show up. Second, I need you to step up. Third, I need you to lead up. And fourth, I need you to know up. Right. So for me, it's those 4 things of first, you get a brand newbie. Look, man, I just need you to show up. Like, show up, be squared away, be on time. Simple. But at some point, I'm going to ask you to step up. Whatever that's going to be, I need you to step up at that point so you can do something. Whether it's you got dinner tonight and you're making it, or I need something, cleaned, or right, whatever that is. And then I need you to, at some point, I'm going to ask you to lead. Right? Leading something, whether you got a crew, whether you're on the nozzle, at some point, there's some leadership piece that I need you to do. And then last, I tell everybody, at some point, when you start to become longer, the words, well, I didn't know, you can't say that anymore once you get to a certain point, right? Like, obviously some things, so that's my no up thing. But I'm like, if you could do those 4 things, and that's all you need to hold people accountable to from the beginning. Now, granted, if you're a brand new BC, you can't just show up, right? You got to have all the rest already there. But for my newbies, I tell people, don't expect more than just this. If you just tell them this is how I want to do it, right? Show up, step up, lead up, know up, then all of a sudden the pressure's off, right? To some degree. Because what I found in the outside world was I had a lot of I worked at this one company in California, and the CEO was a brand new CEO. He's like, man, I saw how it was all working. I wanted to do it on myself. And he didn't want to put rules in. He was like, no, we didn't have those rules before. And he didn't want to put a structure necessarily around it. He's like, no, people can kind of, I trust. And I'm like, bro, if you don't,
we all need boundaries.
Right. Man. You have to have, one was simple as like, do you refill a gas tank before if you're using the company car and you rental, do you fill it up before? And he thought, everybody should know that you fill it up before you get, and I was like, they don't all know that, right? Like, it's not, you can't assume that people know.
Make it easy for them.
Yeah, exactly. And people go, well, if you make it, you spoon feed them to, look,
no,
it's a different world we live in, right? I did a huge generational study, and I found it just on my own.
I want them to focus on what's important.
Yes, absolutely.
If it's
right?
just follow the steps, man. Fill the gas tank, park it in this spot, right? And focus on I want you to focus on what's important. Let me tell you some of the smaller procedural things to make the job so you don't have to focus so much on that, right? And so there's no...
Yeah, there's time. Like, that's the other thing, right? We try, I think, to impress. George Carlin said this best. He's a huge proponent back in the day just of saying the things, but he said everything in America is cyclic. And I'm going to, every 20 years, things are coming back around and we're always bigger, better, bigger, better. It has to be that. And he said, well, we don't take time and enough is to plateau. Like, it's okay that someone stays at a certain rank because they're learning whatever they need to. And it's, I think it's our job to go, hey, maybe we're not ready for this yet. Or if you see someone who's a good example of maybe you want them to be, or maybe you think they could be a good leader, in a different color helmet someday, then cool. Then you could take it upon yourself to start giving them those leadership lessons as you see fit, as the right time. But I think to his point, sometimes you just got to let people marinate a little bit and learn some lessons at a certain level. We've had a lot of, because the gap, right? This gap that we have like these 20-year, 25-year kind of group that all came in. And then it's like we have a gap to like these 10 years, right? Like, oh, I've only been in 10 years or less. So there's this middle gap. And what I've said, my next door neighbors, he used to own like one of the top, not own, but he used to be on the top 5, one of the top 5 leadership podcasts in the world. And he said, he goes, the rise of the mediocre leader has happened. And we're okay with that. Like, we're okay with this kind of mediocreness sitting there because our group was so leadership focused, war, let's go. Everybody involved had that intensity. And we don't have that now, right? So all these other things are kind of slipping in. It's a lot different than what it used to be, even so far. And I mean, you probably see it better at where you're at, but like, it's not the same as it used to be in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not what Iran is at this point, you know? So I think you'll start to see that more though, as we go through, and with junior folks, just let them ripen at the time that they need to, you know, you don't need to make them fast.
Yeah, leadership's always evolving, you know, and people are always evolving. Things are changing. The way that people think is, but there are some of those key, you know, core competencies that shouldn't go away through that evolution.
100%.
To his point, you know, that mediocrity is slipping in where it shouldn't. You know, there's some things of the past leader that are good that they went away, right? There was a tendency to be much more autocratic, you know, through World War II and Vietnam. Go do because I said so. Yep. We just had, you know, on the last podcast, episode 65, talking about a wildfire in California in 1977,
a Honda,
where the firefighters, these augmentee firefighters, were just told, man, just you go do, you know, because their commanders, their leaders, were all from the Vietnam era, and that's just what they did. Man. Like that's how they operated. That was normal. Same with World War II, right? That's not necessarily the way to be, right? Autocratic, it has a very specific application. A very specific time when it's necessary, you know, emergency scene when you just got to lock in, you have to listen to what I tell you to do. And yeah, combat, I would think is another example of that. But for 99.9% of your time, like that's not necessarily the right answer, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff should go away. But then there's those core competencies like communication, caring, all that kind of stuff that should continue to move through and not being laissez-faire, making sure that the policy is, the foundation is set, and those kind of things need to maintain through the evolution.
You nailed it in saying, and we still do it. This is I think the hard part that people have an issue with. I don't think for the first time, and maybe not, but the fire ground is exactly what we talked about doing, right? Like it is about do as I say. I need you to do this right now. Like you get some feedback, but a lot of it is, you know, I'm still going to base a decision off of what the nozzleman sees exactly what's going on, right? He's the furthest one in, and he can relay information back.
There's some decentralized decision making.
Absolutely, right? It is that way. But then...
Yeah, you want that nozzleman to be a leader, too, in his own respect.
100%. And everybody is, to some degree, their own, right? You have to lead yourself. Yeah. That's the accountability piece. I get that. But when we go back to the firehouse, we don't make the switch to go, okay, time out. I was that leader the way I needed to be on the fire ground. Fire's over. Now I have to change and go back to, right, the very more fluid, very more, right, like the dynamics of a leader in the firehouse are probably 10 to 20 times more than what it is on the fire ground, right?
Sure.
The fire ground is very
easy. It's easy leadership on the fire ground. I mean, you know, I'm not suggesting that a structure fire is an easy situation to take care of. It's just the leadership is easy.
Totally, because it's set for you. It's literally if this, then this. If I see a code and I see a you know, whatever rhythm I see, in the back of my but in the back of my head, I'm going, hey, I know because I see this, I need to do this. Same thing. You get back at the house, it's not so, well, he's not performing like he should. Hold on, I need to automatically, well, that's not it. Like there could be a million different things. You got to go investigate it, figure it out. I told somebody this the other day. I said, just think of the environment you could have if someone can come in and go, hey man, we were working all weekend. I didn't get a chance to cut my grass, whatever the cases are, just something stupid. But you're like, I didn't get to do my home stuff. You know, can we work it out? Like a good leader, if you can. And I know I'm trying to schedule that dude off a day. Like, hey man, you're supposed to work Tuesday. We don't need you. It was an extra job. You know, take Tuesday off. I know you're here today, but take tomorrow off because you didn't get a chance. Like, and I know it's not that simple. I get it. I know manning is a huge issue. Staffing is a huge issue. I understand that. But like being able to forward think and go, man, I need my people to get off, you know, or have some time away or whatever the case. that's a different skill set than you're using on the fire ground. And I think to your point, very autocrat, and we still have the hierarchy, right? You got to follow this guy, right? There's not a gal, whatever.
Military in the fire service. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and I don't want to suggest that the majority are autocratic out there, because in my experience, it's really not. It's not the case. But there are a handful, and they stick out, like sore thumbs. So I think there's a lot of great leaders out there. I think there's a lot of people doing great things. There's a lot of good subordinate leaders. There's a lot of great followers too. So I know we've had a lot of conversations about you should do this, that, and the other thing. There's probably a lot of people out there doing that. So
100%.
It's I always like to highlight that that there's some good leaders out there, but there are always leadership issues, right? There's always gaps in communication. There's always clarity issues. There's always accountability issues. And I think you nailed it when, of course you have that experience in talking with these fire departments, but I would say in my experience in interacting with the firefighters, within my circle, it's the same thing. It's like, how do I hold this guy accountable? Sick leave abuse, right? Not showing up on time. If a guy shows up drunk, right? And I mean, these are the kind of things that happen every day, and not in the same place, but across the enterprise, right? And it's always those are the top two. I think that you nailed it on the head with that. It really is, and it's just like, figuring out how to navigate those is always a challenge. So it's always worth talking about.
Absolutely. And you're gonna, until we have all the, like, it's never. I tell people all the time, like, I could, and anybody can. I could come talk to you right now at your department, and I can tell you to put all these things in place. And if you don't, then my message the next year, if I came back, would be the exact same of say, well, we didn't do anything. But even if you changed, even if you did whatever, and I tell everybody one thing, if you can change one thing, and I always say one for you, one for the crew, right? Because we talk about different leadership stuff that you can do for yourself. We talk about what you can do for your crews and how you can kind of put some frameworks together. But I tell everybody, one for you, one for the crew. If you can adopt a couple of those sayings, like, does it make sense, clarity, that stuff, that's one thing that will change your entire thing. But even
listening is such a big piece of communication.
Even sick leave. Why is that person not come? Like, I remember, and you probably do too, when the days are good, you don't care that you're not at home. Like, you're just like, this is fun. To your point, when we deployed, I tell this all the time, it is harder, I think, for the average firefighter today who is working 6 days a week, and they're mandated to step on because they can't, mandated overtime. It's not like they're, right? Sure, they're making a crap load of money, but it doesn't matter. Like, prove real quick that money doesn't matter, right? Yeah.
Money doesn't matter at a certain point.
Right. But, like, so I know why they're using their sick days, right? And by the way, they're supposed to be able to use their sick days. So we shouldn't be like, well, why is he, whether it's abuse or not? I totally, but it's still, when your firehouse is good, you don't feel like that. Like, you don't, and I've seen some great, really creative ways people still, like, families coming in and allowing to come in during the day when, for lunches and things, like I've seen some good things where people still made sure that their people were still connected, at home and things like that. Cause you're right. The end all be all is like the business. It's the job's got to get done. We got to have those people on watch. It is important. And I just think we are, to your point, we hear so much about the negativities and so much about but most people are doing it right? We know the toxic leaders, we can pull them out. My focus is the leaders that they're at, like, what do I do when we have all this stuff, Yeah,
maybe the leaders that are doing it right, but they, need to sharpen the skills. I think we all need to sharpen the skills, no matter how tenured you are. I was a tactical level leader, 10 years ago, right? And I've that some of that skill is atrophied, and so it's important to sharpen that skill set. And so I think it's always worth talking about this kind of stuff. Flip, I want to give you an opportunity to, mention where folks can find you, what specific offerings that you have, and anything else you'd like to share related to that.
Yeah. So for me, it'd be easy, right? You can find me, you can log onto the website, www.firehousefreedom.com. It's there. Flip at firehousefreedom.com is also a way just to send something to me. And what do? I look at your entire program from the ground up and go, what are you aligning yourselves to? Usually that's a mission and vision statement to it. But I think one of the unique things is that, look, and this is no diss to anybody. The 50-year fire chiefs who have these amazing stories about what they did are incredibly valuable. I think that not the hierarchy, but the legacy of the fire service in general, starting back from the volunteers in Ben Franklin to every single way that we've ever done it, that is important to keep going with the next generation, is to teach that stuff. But what I see and what I really focus on is like this newest generation and the generational gap. The kind of, we were all fed all these leadership books, and now we're kind of revolting against that. People are showing up and asking for the why, when we were taught by Simon to ask for the why, and now we're kind of looking at it going, wait a second, I just need you to do what I say to do. And I go, okay, hold on, motivations are different. So, I do 2-day classes, and I love, those are my favorite. I will tell everybody, I love to come in and just to see what you guys do, break things down for you. And in general, Matt, like you said, well, why you were like, man, this will be interesting to have you on. It's a different perspective. Like, I'm not beholden to the unions. I'm not and I'll admit it, right? And I'll admit too, nobody's going to come in here and tell you that your city councilman who runs your budget, that you're going to ever change anything by coming in. But what I think, to your point, is get a fresh look at stuff. I tell people all the time, one of 3 things I want to happen. 1, I want you to at least go, I never looked at it like that before. That's a different way, right? Very relatable. 2, I hope you have an aha moment, right? Those beautiful, like, oh, I get it now, right? If we can have that. Or 3, and I think this is usually what happens, and I think good leaders have to do this, and as a dad, I definitely do, is planting a seed for later, right? Like, I hope that when you walk out of those things, that in any way, whether that's, a 2-day course, whether we do a 6-week online, or even do the mentorships of a 90-day or a 6-month, if you can do that, or even a keynote or session, if you can walk away with one of those things, I never saw it like that, man, I just had an aha moment. Or in time, the seed plants, and all of a sudden you're like, that's what Flip meant. That's what he was talking about. I think those are my 3 things to be able to help people kind of transition through this time where we have the leadership gaps, where we have a generationals, right? Our generationals have changed just because of this thing, right? Like, our phones, totally different. And so I really like those 2 that we talked, which is communication and clarification, and then the accountability side and really framework. So any of those things, I love hearing from people. I talk to different departments every single day, and looking forward to get out and seeing more, and bringing me in and just, having those honest conversations. I think that's something that I think you can definitely take into advantage of nowadays, is going, let's have these conversations and learn. Because I think what we see every time, especially the 2 days, and again, I love them, is that you hear different stuff you've never heard before from your group. Right. And you're like, oh, I never knew that about him, or I didn't knew that about her. And now all of a sudden they become stronger as a unit as they move forward.
Man, that's an excellent point. And as an instructor, even, and I do a little bit of adjunct instruction, and you learn to, like, I imagine the learning experience that you have and listening to other people, and, what an opportunity that is too.
Yeah. Like I said, that battalion chief, he made me go home, and I went, whoa.
Exactly. Yeah. You went home, you reflected, let me think on this a little bit. Let me read up on this, maybe even change your perspective a little bit. Yeah. Like, we're all, again, you may deliver this kind of training, but, we're all learning too. Again, we're trying to sharpen our skills, but 100%. I love that you said, you alluded to it there at the end, but you've said it previously too. It's like, take one thing away. I've always said the same thing. Like, if I'm an organizational leader in any capacity, and you want to make positive changes, right? I think everybody who steps in or crosses a threshold into a different position, you should be, or in some capacity, motivated to make some kind of a lasting and positive change, make it better than what you found it, right?
Yeah,
but
100%.
I love that approach, that idea of, like, just, I always say, throwing it all. I have all these ideas. Let me just throw them at the wall and see which one sticks, right?
Yep.
understanding that not all of them are going to stick. And
Yeah.
if I could get one thing or two things to stick, then I've left it better than I found it. I think that's a great approach, and it's a mindset to help you kind of endure the challenges associated with trying to make change, because a lot of changes, and Heifetz and Lidsky talk about it in Leadership on the Line. If you haven't read that one, fantastic book. It's worth your time, and it could help in your developing lessons and your conversations.
Yeah.
But, they talk about adaptive change, those changes that take a long time and, that require a shift in culture. And so it's important to understand that you're not going to do those things in a week, in a month, or even a year, right? You have to throw it at the wall, and hopefully it sticks, and hopefully it sticks in time, even after you've gone away. Like you said, you plant the seed, and maybe that plant, grows after your time. So I do love that point. I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, no worries. I always tell people, like, you can't, I would call it the culture elephant, right? And in class, I'm like, how do you eat an elephant? And it's bite by bite. And I call them ROW, like results-oriented work environments. But if you can take, so as to your point, if you can take small, people want culture. They want great culture. Like, I want a great culture here, right? Like, no chief wants to have a place, I don't think, that people are like, oh,
you want an
autonomous culture. I have to go to work again today, right? You'd rather go, okay, I know I got to go to work because, like, I wish we had off more. But man, at least when I go, we're lockstep. Because when it's not, that's the other thing. If you can't control the staffing, if you can't, because it's out of your control, just of whatever, to some degree it's out of your control, then you better have the best place for people to come to work, right? The environment better be good. Everything kind of better roll, because then you at least have happy people, right? Then they're at least happy knowing full well we can't control that, we're working on it or whatever, right? Like that's just, and again, I say it bite by bite, little by little, it'll change over time.
Yeah, great perspective too, man. The elephant analogies are popular. God, where did I read that? I read that somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
Not about eating the elephant, but steering the elephant. It could have been Leadership on the Line.
Yeah.
And I think that's another analogy with steering a culture. Like, are you going to, how quick does a ship is another great analogy, right? Like, to steer the ship, and people use that analogy all the time, but you're not gonna turn that thing like a sports car. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's a slow turn. And so, yeah, approaching it with that perspective can help you mentally navigate that as a leader and those challenges as a leader. So
I agree.
Flip, I really appreciate your time, man. I love the wisdom that you dropped on us. Thank you for sharing your naval experience. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, man.
It was awesome to hear, your perspectives. It's cool to get a Navy guy on here and a search and rescue guy at that, some, paramedicine, corpsman background. So that was cool. And appreciate you coming on and, dropping everything you did on us.
Thanks, Matt. It's been a great time, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed the conversation, you can find this episode and many more on our website, firedog.us, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at the Firedog Podcast. That is the Fire DAWG Podcast. This episode was supported by Roll Call Coins, telling stories of fire departments and teams through premium custom challenge coins. Learn more at rollcallcoins.com. It was also supported by AOS Services, helping fire departments stay mission ready with worldwide firefighting equipment compliance. Find more at aosservicesinc.com. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in this conversation, consider sharing it with a friend, a coworker, or someone around the firehouse. This is Matt Wilson with guest Flip Griffin. Until next time, stay safe.